Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video, we will be looking at objective versus subjective. Compared to a lot of the distinctions we handle, this hopefully will be a pretty simple and pretty intuitive distinction. The way that philosophers parse this distinction is not very different from the way that we would intuitively or normally make this distinction. So hopefully this shouldn't be too difficult. So, I have a question for you. If a tree falls in the forest and there is no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? I didn't hear anything. Well, the idea behind this question is an important concept in philosophy, and it's a very famous kind of question that you may have heard of before you've even heard of what philosophy is. I'm not going to answer this question perfectly in this video, and there are other concerns other than the objective-subjective distinction which come into play here, but the objective-subjective distinction can help us understand why this is a question. So, first off, let's look at the word roots. So the words objective and subjective are really derived from object and subject. An object is something which is metaphysical, real, and existing independent of our perception of it. That's the important part. A subject, on the other hand, is something which observes, usually a person or an observer of some kind, something that can form opinions. There's a lot of question of this around kind of philosophy of mind, which we're not going to delve into right now, but take basically the subject as a person and maybe some other things for now. Something is objective if it is independent of our opinions on it. It exists without observation or a subject perceiving it or thinking about it. A property is objective if a particular object can have that property regardless of any subject's opinion about that object. If you believe that sounds are objective, then you think that a tree falling in the woods makes a sound even if no one hears it. Usually we think of things like objective facts about the world. There is a chair there. That's an objective fact. It's not dependent on what people would think of it. Or at least a lot of people conceive of things that way. Though some people might conceive of truths about the world and facts about the world as subjective in some important way. What do we mean by subjective? Well, if something is subjective, that means that it depends on a subject for its existence or properties. It means that it is our perception or opinions about that particular object which give it particular properties. If you thought that something making a sound was subjective, that the idea of making a sound was only something that we as subjects invented and created and only could be in some way defined or exist if there was a subject to observe it, then you would claim that if no one heard the tree falling in the woods, it would not make a sound. Basically, what you would be thinking there is that the only way something can make a sound is if there's someone to define that crash, that noise as a sound, or that thing as making that sound. In fact, some people might argue that the tree as something separate from the rest of the world around it might not exist objectively, that it's only our subjective grouping of certain molecules in one place and certain molecules in another that call that thing a tree, and our grouping of certain wavelengths in one place and certain wavelengths in another that call a certain thing a sound. Some people might claim then that it is subjective making a sound, and therefore, if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, it doesn't make a sound. While I may have one subjective experience and you may have another, perhaps we have different emotions when faced with a particular situation. Objective facts, on the other hand, can't be different depending on who perceives them. The objective facts are facts about the object. The subjective facts are facts about our experience or a subject's experience of that object. If something is objective, then it cannot depend on who is perceiving it for its truth. All right, so what do you think? What properties are objective? What properties are subjective? This is a question that crosses basically all areas of philosophy. What will be the case even without an observer, and what depends on an observer? Do facts about good, are they objective or are they subjective? What about truth? Is truth something that's objective or subjective? What about facts about beauty? Is that objective or is it subjective? Offer your answers in the comments below, and watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.